The chase began with a single shout, "Thief!" In the crowded Lagos market, a billionaire sprinted after a ragged girl clutching his briefcase worth thousands of dollars. Nobody could understand how a child dared to rob him in broad daylight. But hidden behind that desperate act was a secret that would change both of their lives forever. Stay with me as we dive in this tale, cause you won't regret watching to the end. The sun beat down on the crowded market of Lagos, casting long golden rays over the maze of stalls, hawkers, and restless feet. Smoke rose from women frying puff-puff in blackened pans. The smell of roasted corn mixed with sweat and hot dust. Shouts of traders selling tomatoes, peppers, and second-hand clothes rose into the air like competing drums. In this chaos, a little girl slipped quietly between the bodies, unseen, unheard, her eyes darting left and right. Her name was Ada. She could not have been more than 12, her dress torn at the hem, her hair matted in small coils. She had been sleeping under a wooden store for weeks, her belly empty most nights, her heart heavy with fear. But today was different. Today, desperation had sharpened her courage. From the far side of the street, a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop, its tinted windows catching the sunlight like mirrors. People turned to look. Cars like that did not belong to these streets. From inside stepped a tall man in a clean navy blue suit, his wristwatch glittering like a second sun. His shoes were polished, his tie silk, his face tan. The market women whispered his name, Benjamin Anderson, the billionaire CEO. Some called him a cold man, others admired him for his power. But to Ada, he was not a man of stories or rumors. He was only a chance, a fragile thread of hope. In his hand he carried a brown leather briefcase, the kind that looked heavy with secrets, and to Ada, it could only mean one thing, money. Her mother's face came to her mind at that moment, thin, pale, gasping for breath in the hospital bed. The nurses had said she would not last another night if treatment was not paid for. Ada had begged, cried, even knelt, but no one listened. To the world, she was just a homeless child. But to her mother, she was everything. The thought of her mother's fading voice saying, "Ada, my Ada, don't let me go," pressed against her chest like a stone. Ada did not think again. She moved. Her feet were light, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. She slipped behind the man, stretched her arm, and in one swift motion snatched the briefcase from his grip. For a second, silence filled her ears, as if the world itself gasped. Then noise erupted, shouts, curses, the man's voice roaring, "Thief!" Ada ran. She ran through the market like wind-breaking branches, weaving between stalls, pushing past women with baskets, ignoring the angry cries of traders whose tomatoes tumbled onto the ground. Benjamin followed, his long legs pounding the dirt, his voice cutting through the crowd, "Stop her. Stop that girl." The briefcase was heavy, far heavier than Ada had imagined, but her fear gave her strength. She clutched it to her chest and darted down narrow alleys where only children could slip. Behind her, Benjamin's men jumped from the SUV and joined the chase. Market boys shouted, some laughing, some cheering, some trying to block her path, but she slipped through like smoke. Her chest burned, her legs shook, but she dared not slow down. Every second counted. Every breath reminded her of her mother's shallow breathing, the way her lips turned blue when the coughing fit came. Ada burst out of the market into the wider street. Cars honked, people shouted, but she dashed across without looking. A motorcycle swerved and nearly crashed. She did not stop. Ahead, she saw the white walls of Lagos General Hospital. Her heart leapt. If she could just reach there, if she could just hand this money over, maybe her mother would live. Benjamin was closer now, his breath harsh, his face dark with fury and disbelief. Never in his life had he chased anyone like this, never had he been robbed so boldly. But something in the girl's frantic movement stirred him. This was not the careless run of a street thief chasing excitement. This was desperation, pure and raw. Ada stumbled at the hospital gate, nearly falling, but the guards shouted in confusion as she pushed through. "Please. Help me," she cried, her voice breaking. She ran straight to the reception, the briefcase banging against her thin knees. Nurses looked up in shock. Patients turned in their chairs. The girl slammed the case on the counter. "Take it. Please, Save my mother. Don't let her die. Her words broke in gasps as tears ran down her dusty cheeks. The nurses froze, staring at her, at the leather briefcase, then at the angry billionaire storming in seconds later. Benjamin's presence filled the hall. His eyes locked on the girl. The guards moved to grab her, but he raised a hand. Wait. Ada's small body shook as she clutched the counter. She turned slowly, her eyes wet, her face streaked with sweat and dirt. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. I had no choice. She pointed down the hallway, where a thin woman lay on a bed visible through the open ward door. The woman coughed violently, nurses trying to hold her up, her skin pale, her breath shallow. That is my mother. They said she would die tonight if I don't bring money. I can't let her die. Please. The hall fell into silence. The market noise outside faded, the hospital machines hummed faintly, and all that remained was the sight of a billionaire standing still, his briefcase on the counter, and a girl no older than 12 trembling before him. Benjamin's chest rose and fell. He should have been furious. He should have called the police. But as his eyes followed the line of the girl's hand to the woman struggling on the bed, something inside him shifted. Memories stirred, memories of his own mother lying sick many years ago, when he was still a poor boy in Enugu, begging for help that never came. He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening, but his voice came low, almost broken. What is her name? Ada blinked at him, surprised, unsure if she was in more danger. Her name is Ngozi, she said softly. My mother. Benjamin looked at her again, then at the frail woman fighting for breath. The briefcase seemed heavier now, not with money but with meaning. His hands clenched, and he let out a slow breath. The chase had ended, but something far more powerful had begun. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear, that sharp scent that clung to every corridor where cries of pain and hope mingled together. Nurses moved quickly, their white shoes tapping against the floor like drumbeats, carrying trays of medicine and rushing toward patients who begged for relief. In the middle of this world of sickness and waiting stood Ada, her thin body trembling, her hands still pressed against the leather briefcase. Her mother lay in the ward, her chest rising and falling with difficulty, each breath a battle. Ada's eyes darted from the billionaire to the door of the ward, as though every second she spent away from her mother could be the one in which the woman slipped into silence forever. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her chin was raised, defiant and desperate. Benjamin Anderson stood a few steps away, his chest heaving from the chase, his face shadowed with something more than anger. His men waited at the door, confused, restless, expecting orders to arrest the girl. But Benjamin raised his hand again, silencing them. His gaze was fixed on Ada, and then on the pale figure of her mother. Where is the doctor? He asked, his voice low but sharp. A nurse blinked, startled, before hurrying off. Within moments, a middle-aged man in a white coat appeared, adjusting his glasses. He looked from the powerful figure of Benjamin to the frightened child holding the briefcase. Sir, is there a problem? Benjamin's eyes flickered toward the bed where Ngozi lay. That woman, what is wrong with her? The doctor hesitated, then sighed. She is suffering from advanced pneumonia. The infection is spreading fast. We told her daughter we could begin treatment, but the cost, his voice trailed off, his eyes falling on Ada, pity in his tone. They could not pay. Ada's knees buckled at his words. She pressed her palms together in pleading. Please, doctor. I brought money. Take it. Save her. Her voice cracked, but her spirit burned through it. The doctor adjusted his glasses again, uncertain. His eyes flicked toward Benjamin, waiting for permission. For in this moment, everyone in that hall knew the briefcase did not belong to the child. It belonged to the man in the suit. Benjamin exhaled slowly. For a long time he said nothing, and in that silence the buzzing of the hospital machines grew louder, the coughing of patients harsher, and the quiet sobs of Ada unbearable. Finally, his lips parted. Open the case. Ada's hands shook as she fumbled with the clasps. The briefcase opened with a click, revealing neat stacks of crisp dollar bills and a few documents. The sight drew gasps from those standing nearby. To Ada, the money glowed brighter than sunlight, a river of life flowing before her eyes. She looked up at the doctor. Take it. Please. Benjamin's eyes narrowed. He was watching not the money, but the child. The way she looked at it, not with greed, but with fear and hope intertwined. A memory rose in his chest like a ghost, himself, a skinny boy in torn slippers, standing outside a clinic in Enugu, clutching a torn school bag, begging a doctor to save his own mother who would later die in his arms because no money came. The wound never healed, it only hardened him. But now, before him, stood a mirror of that memory. The doctor glanced at Benjamin again, as if asking a silent question. Benjamin gave a curt nod. Do it, he said. Nurses rushed forward, pulling the briefcase away and counting quickly. Treatments were ordered, oxygen adjusted, injections prepared. Ada followed them into the ward, her small hand gripping her mother's. Mama, you'll be okay now, she whispered. I brought the money. You'll be okay. Ngozi's tired eyes fluttered open for a moment. She smiled faintly at her daughter, her lips moving without sound. Ada bent close, hearing the weak whisper, my Ada, my brave girl. Benjamin remained at the door, watching, his jaw tight. His men shifted uncomfortably. One of them leaned in and whispered, Sir, should we call the police? She still stole from you. Benjamin's eyes did not leave the fragile woman fighting for life on the bed. No, he said flatly. Not yet. Hours passed. Night settled over Lagos, and the hospital lights buzzed with a dull hum. Ada refused to leave her mother's side, her small body curled on the chair beside the bed, her fingers locked around her mother's hand. From time to time she glanced toward the door, where Benjamin still lingered, silent, unreadable. He had sent his men away, but he stayed, as though the ghost of his past had chained him there. Finally, near midnight, the doctor returned. His voice was cautious, but softer now. She is stable, sir. The treatment came in time. She will need days of care, but she is out of immediate danger. Ada let out a cry of relief, burying her face in her mother's hand, sobbing. Her body shook with the force of her gratitude. Thank you, thank you. Benjamin's face was shadowed, his eyes unreadable. When the doctor left, he stepped closer, his voice deep. What is your name, girl? Ada raised her head slowly, her eyes red and swollen. Ada, she whispered. Where is your father? He asked. Her lips trembled. He died when I was small. It has been just Mama and me since then. The words pierced him, as if echoing his own life. He stood there for a long while, silent, before turning away. His footsteps echoed in the hall as he left the ward. But in his chest, something stirred, something long buried under wealth and coldness. The image of the girl's tears and her mother's whisper would not leave him. As he stepped out into the Lagos night, the city lights stretching wide, Benjamin felt the weight of the empty briefcase in his hand. The money was gone, but in its place, something heavier pressed against him, questions he could not yet answer, a story he could not walk away from. In the ward behind him, Ada sat awake beside her mother, holding her hand, unaware that the chase was not truly over. A bond had been formed in the fire of desperation, one that would draw their worlds together in ways none of them could yet imagine. The night in Lagos was restless, neon lights flickering across wide roads where cars still rushed like restless spirits. In the billionaire's mansion at Banana Island, silence ruled, broken only by the hum of the sea breeze sweeping through palm trees. Benjamin Anderson stood in his study, staring at the empty briefcase on his glass table. It had been filled with $10,000 only that morning, but now it was gone, used to keep a poor woman breathing. He poured himself a drink, but his hand trembled as he lifted it. The image of the little girl's tear-streaked face would not leave him. He walked through the mansion, past tall windows and walls hung with paintings that cost more than a family's lifetime. But the wealth felt hollow tonight. His memories returned, himself as a small boy in Enugu, watching his mother's chest rise and fall with the same weak rhythm. He had begged for help, but no one came. Poverty had carved him into stone, hardened him until nothing mattered but power. Yet now, a ragged child had cracked that stone with nothing but desperation. The following morning, Benjamin's driver waited by the SUV as Benjamin prepared to leave for the office. But he did not drive toward the skyscraper where his company stood. Instead, he returned to the hospital. His men looked at him in confusion, but said nothing. Inside the ward, he found Ada asleep in the chair beside her mother's bed, her head resting on her arm, her small frame curled like a bird at rest. Her mother was breathing easier now, oxygen tubes at her nose, her chest rising without struggle. Benjamin stood at the doorway longer than he intended, something heavy pressing his chest. The nurse glanced at him with surprise. "Sir, you are back." "Has she eaten?" he asked, nodding toward the girl. The nurse shook her head. "Not since yesterday. She refuses to leave her mother." Benjamin's eyes softened. He walked forward, his footsteps drawing Ada awake. She blinked, startled, then quickly stood, her small hands clenched as though ready to be punished. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice weak. "I didn't mean to steal. I only wanted to save her." Benjamin studied her, then shook his head. "Sit," he said. "You are not in trouble." The words seemed strange even to him. He had built his empire by punishing weakness, by crushing anyone who dared cross him. But this girl, this Ada, was different. She had forced him to remember who he once was. Later that day, Benjamin summoned his secretary to the hospital. Papers were brought, forms signed, costs cleared. Ada watched in silence, her eyes wide, unsure why this man who had once chased her through the market was now carrying her world on his shoulders. But the mansion had its own shadows. That evening, when Benjamin returned home, his younger brother Richard waited for him in the lounge. Richard was dressed in a designer shirt, a glass of wine in hand, a smile too sharp for comfort. "I heard about your little adventure," Richard said smoothly. "Chasing a homeless girl through Baligan Market. You're lucky the media didn't catch it. Imagine the headlines, 'Billionaire robbed by child.'" He laughed coldly. Benjamin's jaw tightened. "It's none of your concern? Isn't it?" Richard's eyes glittered. "That briefcase had more than cash, Ben. Important contracts. Documents for the new oil deal. Do you have any idea what you risked?" Benjamin turned away, pouring himself another drink. "I saved a life." Richard sneered. "Since when did saving lives become your business? We built this empire to escape the weak, not to kneel beside them." Benjamin's silence was his only answer, but inside him, a storm raged. He thought of Ada, of the mother's fragile smile. The empire he had built suddenly felt like a cage, built not from iron but from the bones of forgotten humanity. 2 days later, he returned once more to the hospital. This time he asked Ada to come with him. The girl hesitated, fear in her wide eyes, but Benjamin's voice was calm. "I want to show you something." They drove through the gates of Banana Island. Ada pressed her face to the window, staring at the wide roads lined with mansions, the trimmed lawns, the tall gates that glittered with gold. It was a world she had never dreamed of. When they reached the mansion, she stepped out slowly, clutching the hem of her torn dress, afraid to dirty the polished tiles. Inside, the chandelier sparkled, the marble floors shone, and servants bowed as Benjamin entered. Ada shrank behind him, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. He led her to the dining hall, where food enough for 20 people lay spread across the long table. Ada's eyes widened at the steaming plates, the golden cutlery, the bowls of fruit. She swallowed hard, but her hands stayed folded. "Eat," Benjamin said simply. Ada shook her head. "Mama should eat first." Benjamin's chest tightened. In her voice was something he had long forgotten, selflessness, the kind that did not exist in boardrooms or among shareholders. He nodded slowly. "She will. But you must eat too." As she took a seat timidly and reached for bread, Benjamin watched her, and in her small movements he saw the cracks in his own heart widening. She was not like the world he knew, not shaped by greed but by love. That night, Benjamin walked through the halls of his mansion, restless. Richard's words echoed in his ears, full of venom. Contracts, wealth, reputation, all of it weighed against the fragile life of a poor woman and her daughter. And for the first time in many years, Benjamin wondered which side he belonged to. In her room at the hospital, Ngozi stirred, whispering Ada's name. The treatment had eased her pain, but her body was still weak. "Who is that man?" she asked softly. Ada held her hand and shook her head. "I don't know, Mama. But he helped us." Ngozi's lips curved in a faint smile. "Then he is an angel sent by God." But angels are never without their battles. And in the mansion at Banana Island, betrayal was already taking root. For Richard had no intention of allowing Benjamin's heart to soften. There was too much at stake, too much money and power tied to the briefcase that now lay empty. He poured himself another glass of wine, his smile curling darkly. "If my brother wants to play father to a street girl," he muttered, "then I will remind him what it cost." The paths of wealth and poverty had crossed, and none of their lives would remain the same. The road to Enugu wound through red earth hills and forests where palm trees swayed in the wind. Dust rose behind the black SUV as it climbed toward the village. Inside, Ada sat quietly beside her mother, who leaned weakly against the seat. Her eyes were brighter now, but her body still carried the scars of sickness. She held her daughter's hand, whispering prayers under her breath. Benjamin sat opposite them, his face unreadable, his thoughts heavy. He had insisted on bringing them here, away from the choking noise of Lagos, away from the shadow of contracts and betrayals. When the SUV finally stopped, the village gathered, curious eyes following the gleaming car. Children ran barefoot, pointing and laughing, while women carrying water paused to watch. Benjamin stepped out fast, his polished shoes sinking into the red dust, his suit a strange contrast against mud huts and narrow paths. Ada climbed out next, helping her mother carefully. Ngozi's frail frame trembled, but her lips curled in a smile at the sight of her homeland. The elders approached slowly, their walking sticks tapping the ground. One of them, a tall man with a wrinkled face and eyes sharp as flint, greeted Benjamin with measured words. "You are welcome, stranger. What wind carries a man like you into our quiet land?" Benjamin bowed slightly, something unusual for him. "I have come to honor a woman's journey," he said, nodding toward Ngozi. The elder's gaze softened as he recognized her. Murmurs rose among the villagers. "It is Ngozi," someone whispered. "She has returned." The people remembered her youth, her beauty, her laughter before hardship carried her away. Now she returned thin, fragile, but alive. Within days, the inevitable came. Ngozi's body could not bear the long fight. One night, under the glow of the kerosene lamp, she drew Ada close, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "My daughter, be strong. You are not alone anymore." Then her chest fell silent. Ada clung to her mother's still body, her cries breaking through the walls like thunder. Benjamin stood at the doorway, watching the child's grief. For the first time in many years, his own eyes burned with tears. He turned away, his fist clenched, the memory of his own mother's death flooding back. He had thought money had freed him from pain, but standing in that mud hut, he realized wealth could not silence grief. The burial was done in the old way. The women wailed, the men dug into the red earth, and the elders chanted prayers. Ada stood alone, her small body trembling as they lowered her mother into the ground. She felt as though the earth swallowed not just her mother but her last anchor in the world. Yet, when her knees weakened, a strong hand steadied her. She looked up to see Benjamin, his face solemn, his presence unshaken. He stood beside her until the last mound of soil was pressed down. That evening, the village square filled with voices. The elders gathered with Benjamin, and the people listened. He stood tall, his voice deep and steady. "I came here because of a girl who risked everything to save her mother," he began. His eyes found Ada in the crowd. Her courage reminded me of a truth I had long forgotten. Wealth means nothing if it does not lift others. He paused, letting the words sink into the quiet night. "I will build a hospital here, in this village. No child should ever have to steal to save a life. No mother should be left to die because there is no money." Gasps rose among the villagers, followed by murmurs of awe. The elders nodded, their eyes shining with respect. For them, words were not enough, but the promise of action was a seed that would grow into blessing. Richard, however, was not silent. News of Benjamin's decision had reached him, and he stormed into the village days later, anger burning in his eyes. "Have you lost your mind, Ben?" he shouted in front of the elders. "Do you know how much this will cost? Do you know what you are throwing away?" Benjamin faced him calmly. "I know exactly what I am doing. For too long, I have measured life only in profit. But today, I measure it in people." Richard sneered, his voice rising. "And all this because of a street girl. Because of pity." Ada shrank at his words, but Benjamin stepped forward, his voice cutting like steel. "Not pity. Love. Something you will never understand if all you see is money." The confrontation ended with Richard storming away, his pride wounded, his plans broken. But for Benjamin, it was a rebirth. The man who had once been enslaved by contracts and figures was now free. He stayed in the village for weeks, overseeing the land chosen for the new hospital, walking the red roads with elders, listening to the people's needs. Ada followed him often, her small feet beside his long strides, her eyes filled with a mixture of grief and hope. One night, as the moon cast silver light over the village, Benjamin sat outside a hut with Ada. She leaned against him, silent, the weight of loss still heavy in her heart. He looked down at her, then spoke softly. "You are not alone, Ada. I lost my mother too, but I had no one. You will not walk that path." She turned her face up to him, her eyes glistening. "Why are you helping me?" Benjamin's gaze drifted to the stars. "Because once, I was you. And no one helped me." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "I will not let history repeat itself." In that moment, under the Nigerian sky, a bond stronger than blood was sealed. A billionaire and a homeless girl, tied together by grief, by love, by redemption. Their story became a tale told around fires, a lesson passed through the lips of elders to the ears of children. It was said that even the richest man can be poor without compassion, and even the poorest child can be rich in courage. As the hospital rose from the red earth months later, its walls painted bright white, the people of Enugu sang praises. They spoke of Ada, the girl who stole a briefcase not for greed but for love. They spoke of Benjamin, the man who discovered his humanity in the eyes of a child. And they spoke of Ngozi, whose sacrifice became the seed of healing for a village. An elder closed the tale with a proverb that lingered in every heart: "The hand that gives is never empty, and the child who weeps for love is never truly alone." And so, the story ended, not with loss, but with renewal. What would you do if you were in Ada's shoes? Would you risk everything to save your loved one? Do you believe Benjamin truly changed, or was it just guilt that pushed him? Share your thoughts below. Your opinion could inspire someone reading. Don't just watch, join the conversation. Would you forgive Ada if you were the billionaire? Do you think money can really heal wounds from the past? And what lesson did you personally take from this story? Comment your answers, like if this touched your heart, and subscribe for more powerful African tales.